VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Welcome to Crosstalk here on VCY America. Today, folks, a new term begins. The inauguration ceremony having taken place this morning. Yesterday, the official swearing in of the president and parade underway here at this point. We're going to get right into it because we have so much to talk about. Our guest, Matt Staver, founder and president of Liberty Counsel. Liberty Counsel is an international nonprofit litigation, education, and policy organization that's dedicated to advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of life, and the family since 1989. Matt, thanks for joining us today here on Crosstalk.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Matt, let's we're going to talk about what's ahead here in the 4-year term, but let's begin by talking about the inauguration today. And it's kind of like same song, second verse, because we saw controversy develop several days back regarding who's going to give this benediction, and because this pastor gave a message 15 years ago about the sin of homosexuality, no longer welcome to participate in the inauguration.
Yeah, and what he does is he replaces him with another pastor who actually, during his benediction, actually mentions homosexual rights. I mean, it's just unbelievable that someone who speaks up on biblical morality and marriage now gets disinvited, and in place of that individual, someone who's going to promote homosexual rights. And now, for the very first time in history, a president during an inaugural speech speaks about homosexual rights. And he speaks about this as though it has to happen to be equal. But he doesn't speak about this in terms of how it undermines morality. I mean, this is just unprecedented for the president to undermine morality, families, and be this divisive in an inaugural address.
Here's the exact quote that came from the White House. "Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law." Great applause. "For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well." Applause took place there again, Matt.
Yeah, and what does that mean? That's what I was referring to, is the love that we commit to each other must be equal. Well, that kind of a phrase would actually sanction polygamy and polyamory, which has group marriages. I mean, it really deconstructs this. I mean, just because you have some kind of love towards someone else or something else, does that mean that you get all of the rights of marriage? No. But that kind of thinking comes out of Obama's radicalism in his inaugural address. I mean, the next 4 years are going to be worse than the last 4 years, and today's inaugural address really sets the tone.
And also, Matt, the parade that's going on right now, we have the participation of the Gay and Lesbian Band Association in this parade, and then Rolling Stone came out reporting a source told them that Lady Gaga is going to be one of the artists performing at a ball for the White House staffers tonight.
What we have is the president who's not the president of the United States. He's the president of the divided states, and he relishes in dividing the states among each other. He has this famous speech that he gave during Democratic convention several years ago when he was a U.S. senator, and he talks about there's not red states and blue states, but the United States of America. That's not this president. This president runs to divide people, to divide and conquer, and ultimately dismantle and deconstruct. And he's doing that with morality. He's doing it with marriage. He's trying to divide and conquer. And really, he is the most immoral president that we've ever had in history, pushing an immorality that is stunning.
Matt, there is another aspect to this, too, and it is the Messiah-like image. Have you seen the Newsweek magazine yet?
Yes, yeah, about the second coming.
Yeah, here we have I'll describe it for listeners who haven't. This is a side profile photo of the president with the headline, "The Second Coming." It's a biblical reference to the return of Christ, so it's called The Second Coming. Keep in mind, a couple of years ago, they had Obama, God of all things, on the cover. And then there's another poster that's being sold by street vendors today, which Fox News reports does not have the official endorsement of the White House, but features the image of the president in prayer with the headline, "Prophecy Fulfilled." And, of course, Matt, we won't forget what Jamie Foxx called Obama our Lord and Savior here just recently at some music awards as well.
You know, this kind of messianic complex that people were putting on him, and Obama doesn't do anything to stop it. So, they may say, well, this is not what President Obama endorsed, but the president could come out and hit that head on and stop that kind of messianic complex. We saw it during the first inauguration and the first run for president. Now we see it again in the second one. He's not the Messiah. He is someone who does not like America. He's someone who does not like the fundamental values on which America is based. He doesn't adhere to the Constitution. He is a dictatorial president that thinks the Constitution is an inconvenience put in his path. He, as a president, doesn't work across the aisles. In fact, he doesn't even work with his own party. He doesn't even invite his own party leaders to Camp David. He's not somebody who wants to get involved and actually solve the problems of the country. He wants to dictate how these things that are very important to all Americans ought to work. And thus, as a result, you're seeing, for example, gun sales go up all across America. Why is that? These are law-abiding citizens that are concerned that basic fundamental rights are being taken away from them. And so the lines are long. They're just enormous in terms of the crowds that are taking place around the country. And it's because he is agitating the people. He's constantly agitating, constantly putting in your face amoral, immoral, and anti-American rhetoric and policies.
Matt, what are you expecting in the second term?
Well, I don't expect Obama to moderate at all. I think he's going to become even more radical. He does not have to look forward to re-election. He will push the entire Democratic Party over the cliff if he has to get his agenda done. He doesn't care about the party. He doesn't care, obviously, about trying to reach across the aisle to the Republican Party, let alone his own party. We saw that, for example, in his first term. He was willing to push the Blue Dog Democrats off the cliff in order to get Obamacare passed. He pushed them off the cliff, got them to vote with him, and they ultimately, most of them did not get reelected during the midterm election. He didn't care about them. He doesn't care about this party that he's a part of. He cares about pushing a radical, ideologically driven agenda. And Barack Obama, radicalism will be on steroids over these next 4 years.
Matt, I'd like to, just a short time ago before coming on air, I came across this on foxnews.com. The headline caught my attention, and it is alarming to many. It says that CBS political director urges Obama to go for the throat of the GOP to cement legacy. A column published on Slate.com over the weekend urged President Obama to pulverize and destroy his Republican opponents, even go for the throat in order to cement his legacy. The words of advice, though, did not come from a Democratic strategist or a former member of the president's inner circle. The nearly 2,000-word playbook came from CBS News' political director, John Dickerson, who also works as chief political correspondent for Slate, had some unusually harsh words for the minority. He said Obama's only option is to obliterate them. The subhead of the article said Obama must declare war on the Republican Party if he wants to transform American politics. There's no indication that the president's clashes with House Republicans will end soon, he wrote. The president, who came into office speaking in lofty terms about bipartisanship and cooperation, can only cement his legacy if he destroys the GOP. If he wants to transform American politics, he must go for the throat. Your comment?
Well, first of all, it's shocking that somebody that is with a major news network like CBS would come out publicly and say this. You know that many of these people think this privately, or they do it around the water cooler. But to come out publicly and say this, he ought to be fired. I mean, obviously, somebody of that radicalism, CBS should disassociate themselves from this individual. On the other hand, this is exactly the thinking, I think, of Obama and his advisors. We saw there was a report before the election that Valerie Jarrett said, that predicting that they were going to win the election, or saying that they were going to win the election, and that once they win the election, they're not going to have mercy on people who did not support President Obama, those people that were opposing his agenda. No mercy was going to be shown to them, and that they deserve to have no mercy. I think what we're going to see is a very vindictive president and an administration that is radical to the core, that literally wants to change America so that 4 more years of this presidency will mean that America is completely a different America than what the founders, what you and I understand it to be. So we're going to have to brace for this. We're going to have to really be wide open with our eyes, understand divisiveness of this particular president, not fall for his rhetoric, and we're going to have to resist to make sure that 4 more years from now, we still have the America that the founders ultimately fought and died for.
Perhaps there was warning when he said there'd be more flexibility after this election.
No question. The more flexibility because he doesn't have to face re-election, and he will do what he has to do. I mean, Harry Reid is working on abolishing the filibuster in the Senate.
Let's talk about that, Matt, in specific, because we may see a vote this very week on that matter.
That's right. We have actually, at Liberty Counsel Action, we've put out some information about that and asking people to make contact with through this email to let their senators know. But here's what he may do. He may abolish the filibuster, and the filibuster essentially means that in order for it protects the minority party, and it's been around in the Senate rules for many, many years. And Republicans lived under the filibuster when they were in the majority, Democrats when they were in the majority. What Harry Reid wants to do is abolish it, meaning that it would take only 51 votes in the Senate to pass anything. Well, there's 55 Democrats right now. What Harry Reid wants to do is abolish the filibuster. That ultimately requires 60 votes. 60 votes in order to vote on something. So you can have a minority party say, hold on, we need to deliberate on this a little bit more. We need some more compromise before we go forward. So you get 60 votes. You don't get the 60 votes, you don't go forward. After you get the 60 votes, then you can get a majority vote to pass something. If he abolishes the filibuster, that means just 51 votes will pass anything. And that means all of this radicalism of Harry Reid and Barack Obama will start flying through the Senate. That will spell bad news with regards to confirmations of judges and appointments and many, many other things that we're going to face.
Yeah. Now, Matt, wouldn't Harry Reid have to break Senate rules to bring this about?
Yeah, he has to actually violate the Senate rules in order to abolish the Senate rules. But, you know, this administration and Harry Reid, they think that they're above the law. So the rules, the Constitution, the law, that's just a kind of an irritant. They use it when they want to, and they ignore it when they want to. And he would have to actually ignore the current Senate rules. He'd have to violate the Senate rules in order to do away with the Senate rules.
And as you pointed out in your release from Liberty Counsel Action, he's got broad union support to go ahead and to do this.
Well, sure he does, because, you know, the unions, they want all of the government protection and benefits, and they're supporting. Now, the rank-and-file union workers not, but the union leadership of some of these other unions are supporting the radical agenda of Barack Obama. And so, consequently, they're in favor of this. I think we need to voice our opposition to our senators not to abolish the filibuster, to keep the filibuster in there. It's called the nuclear option. In other words, the nuclear option is to literally obliterate the whole Senate rules and abolish the filibuster. You're basically dropping a nuclear bomb on the Senate and obliterating the deliberation process that has been part of the Senate rules for many, many years.
Folks, the phone number for the U.S. Senate is 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. We're talking today with Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. A new term begins, and what's in store for America? We'll be taking a break and be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Creation Seminar speaker and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what good can come out of the creation-evolution debate?
Chris, an awful lot of good can come out of it. Usually the media couches evolutionists as the good guys and creationists as the bad guys. But if they were openly to discuss the issue, some really important information and some very interesting scientific controversies would arise. Even in the school classroom, I'm convinced that a student learns better when they're able to address the controversies and come to their own conclusions. If students are taught how to think about an issue and how to make important decisions, then they're going to be better students and certainly better adults that are better able to handle things that occur in their lives. Chris, even good education should start back in Genesis.
If you would like to learn more about science from a Christian perspective, please visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. A new term begins is our theme today. Matt Staver, our guest from Liberty Counsel. Their website is lc.org, lc.org. Their toll-free number 800-671-1776. Matt, there are still many who are, they witnessed the inauguration taking place today, but are still dumbfounded as to how a second term was won, especially in light of where this nation has gone morally, where we've gone economically. The debt that has been compiled under the first four-year term is greater than the 42 presidents, the first 42 presidents of the United States combined.
Yeah, and if you remember during the Republican National Convention last year, back in August, you note that during that time frame, the debt clock exceeded $16 trillion. They had the debt clock ticking.
Yeah.
Well, now it's nearly $16.5 trillion, and that was only a few months ago when that happened. We're going to certainly be at $17 trillion in just a few months. And before you know it, when Barack Obama leaves office, we're going to be in excess of $21 trillion in debt. That's just unsustainable. Mm-hmm. Where we are right now, one economist looked at not only the debt that we have, but also the debt that we have, like in Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, those kinds of debts that we owe, that the GAO takes off the books, and they don't really put it there. But if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, how much do you really owe? And this economist said that if you calculate all the debt we owe, it would take all of the money in the entire world to pay it. Not just America, but all of the available money that's in existence to pay for that. I mean, this is just unsustainable. It will ultimately bring America to its knees and ultimately destroy the American dream. And I think that's exactly what Obama's wanting to do. He doesn't really like the dream. He doesn't care for the founding values of this country.
Matt, as soon as the ceremony was done outside the U.S. Capitol, he went on inside the Capitol and began signing his picks for new cabinet post. Any comments on some of the new picks that he has to head up Department of Defense and some of the other agencies here of our U.S. government?
Well, let's look at three of them. John Kerry for Secretary of State, for example, Hagel for Secretary of Defense, and John Brennan for the Director of the CIA. And let's start with the Hagel first. Hagel for the Secretary of Defense is someone who has had anti-Israel rhetoric, pro-Islamic rhetoric. He opposed the European Union's discussion or deliberation to classify Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. So he is someone who opposed sanctions against Iran, as did Brennan. Brennan also has had some very weak and anti-Israel statements. Hagel has gotten the most visual opposition right now, but Brennan is just as bad, and in fact, in some cases, maybe worse than Hagel. So here's what you got. You got somebody who he's nominating for the head of the defense that actually would be willing to just chop the defense up so that it's a very weak defense. Also someone in that position who supports or who has opposed taking sanctions against Iran, opposed classifying some known terrorist organizations as terrorist organizations, and has been weak on Israel. And then the director of the CIA that's doing some of these undercover and covert operations in the Middle East, same thing. That individual has actually said that Islam has shaped his worldview and, in fact, also had some anti-Israel statements, opposed the European Union of classifying a known terrorist organization that the United States classifies as a terrorist organization. So you combine those two together, CIA and Secretary of Defense, and you have some real themes that are coming out of Obama. He wants to dismantle the military. He wants to make it weaker. He wants to have the Navy go back to the size that it was back in the 1940s. He wants to ultimately bring America down in terms of international strength and resolve. And he also is not going to be someone who's going to stand strongly with Israel, and he's certainly not even going to call a terrorist a terrorist. That's the kind of theme that's coming out of these two nominations. Those are dangerous nominations. They're not in the national interest and certainly not in our national security interest.
And at the same time continue to homosexualize the military.
That's right. At the same time, homosexualize the military. He's going to continue to radicalize that, use the military as a training ground to inculcate homosexuality. And within the military, you have to understand what happens there. You've got people that are operating under orders. And when someone above you is implementing a policy that comes all the way from the president, you have to step in line. Otherwise, you're not going to get promoted, and you're going to be discharged or disciplined. And so they're being forced. It's worse than putting it in a public school context. At least you have a little bit of freedom here. But there, you don't have any freedom to object. You don't have any freedom to dissent. You only have the freedom to obey. And when that homosexual agenda is pushed down, you better obey, or you're going to be discharged or disciplined.
Matt, also some of the other things that we're going to see the further implementation of Obamacare. It is appalling to see all the new rules that are being drafted by Health and Human Services. I know some of these rules, and we just did a program on this, gave the public 30 days to comment on them between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and all of a sudden, despite the fact that everybody's in the nation has their attention on other things, all of a sudden there's the impetus for them to go ahead with new rules, new mandates that are coming forth, the promises of lowering people's health insurance when in fact everybody's seeing double-digit increases. You're involved in a suit right now that I know the appellate court has just announced oral argument date and so on, but take a look at this topic of Obamacare, its implementation, and what you anticipate here in the days to come.
Yeah, this is a real catastrophe that's in the making. Let's look just at the religious liberty clash. Liberty Counsel filed the very first private lawsuit on the day that Obamacare was signed into law on March 23, 2010 by President Obama. And now the Federal Court of Appeals, at the direction of the United States Supreme Court, has set oral argument in briefing. So we're in the process of briefing the case again. I'll argue it again in May, and then we'll have a decision sometime shortly thereafter. And then from there, it's back to the U.S. Supreme Court, most likely. But our case challenges not only the religious liberty component, but the entire employer mandate as well as the aspects of the individual mandate. Here's what's happened, though. January 1, the big news was with Hobby Lobby. And Hobby Lobby now has gone through and they've redone their fiscal year to a different time than January 1. Liberty University's fiscal year is July 1, and that's the case that we represent, along with some other private individuals besides Liberty University. So for Liberty, the mandate takes effect whenever the fiscal year takes effect, which is July 1. For Hobby Lobby, it was January 1. So between now and July 1, most fiscal years of most employers will take place. Some have their fiscal year after, but most of them January 1, July 1. What that means is that you will now be forced at either one of those time frames when your new insurance takes effect to fund abortion. That's a line that just simply we can't cross, that Christians cannot cross. And consequently, that is the biggest religious liberty clash in history, where the federal government is telling individuals and employers, you must fund the killing of innocent human beings, and if you don't, we will penalize you substantially. We will fine you into obliteration. There's no either or there. There's no accommodation. There's no option. You either fund abortion or you get fined into obliteration, and there's nothing in between. So that's a significant issue that's coming. That should also that should bring people into the streets when people begin to realize what's happening with this religious liberty clash.
Well, Matt, you're set to give oral arguments, May?
That's right. It's going to be in May, mid-May, the week of May 14. The date hasn't been set yet, but the week has been chosen, so it's the week of May 14, May 15, right in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. And when would you expect a ruling from this court?
Well, we hope the ruling would come probably before July 1 because we need some relief before July 1. I suspect it'll come before July 1, but we never know. But by mid-May, we should have it within 6 weeks, hopefully, to get a turnaround.
Do you will we get to a point of no return?
We will get to it. Well, we could get to a point of no return. I mean, I think Obamacare could always be undone, and you'd have to dismantle it. But it's kind of like, Medicaid. If you have a problem, how do you dismantle it? It's a big monstrosity. The longer it goes, it becomes this problem that's actually it's a weight that's sinking the entire ship. And Medicare and Social Security, but then how do you ultimately resolve it? Obamacare can get to that point. And once it gets going and the inertia gets going, it ultimately will sink this country. Along with all the other problems that we have and the economic stresses that we have, Obamacare is going to be the 800-pound gorilla that sits on top of it, because it's going to cause our states to expand their Medicaid programs, which they can't fund right now anyway. So that's going to be trickled down to the taxpayers. They're going to have to cut other benefits and cut other things such as roads and tax people more. It will just ultimately tank the economy. For employers, insurance premiums are not going to go down. They're going to go up, and the kind of care you're going to get is going to decrease. So you're going to be paying more for less. And in addition to that, it's going to fund abortion. It's not only the individual employers that are religious that are going to have this clash, and religious employers, not just the employer but the management, but it's also individuals. If you're an individual and you're part of a secular commercial job, and that job, that insurance actually does cover abortion, then you as an individual will be assessed, in addition to your premiums, $1 per month. Every individual that's in a plan that covers abortion will be assessed $1 per month, and that goes directly into covering the abortions. So that's unprecedented as well. And then if you say, well, I'm going to jump out of that, I'm going to go into an exchange if and when they are available, you won't know what they're covering. In fact, under the Obamacare, you don't know until you're actually enrolled. Take this, for example. You go down and you get your car insurance, and you say, well, this premium costs this much, this one costs that much. What's the difference? Let me see what it covers. Well, we can't do that. You've got to pay your premium and sign up. And then once you do that, once you're in the program, we'll tell you what it covers. That's what Obamacare does. You will not know what an exchange covers until you pay your premium and you sign up. And they did that intentionally so that you couldn't pick and choose which plan to get and avoid those that fund abortion.
That's absurd.
It's crazy. From just a consumer shopping standpoint, it's kind of like Nancy Pelosi. Pass the bill, and then we'll read it and find out what's in it.
Yeah.
Sign up for your exchange, pay your premium, and then we'll tell you what it covers. Makes no sense, but that's the way Obamacare is written.
Folks, it's time to wake up to what's going on in these issues, and certainly to look as to what is going on here behind closed doors. Matt, we see what's going on, just the verbiage in front of everybody, but what's going on behind the scenes has got to be very alarming.
It has to be very alarming. It's probably good that we don't even know what's going on behind the scenes, because we'd probably be alarmed. I think if it weren't for your faith, it would be hard to get through this kind of time. And we have to pray, and we have to act and work through this next 4 years. But it's going to be a tough struggle. We'll
have a few more thoughts with Matt Staver here on Liberty Counsel. If you'd like to get on board with your question or comment, our number 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829, as we talk about a new term beginning today. We'll be back in 1 minute.
The tidal wave of Islam is sweeping across America. But do you know what Muslims believe? VCY America is making available a handy-sized booklet, The Facts on Islam, which spotlights Islam's explosive growth and increasing influence in the world. You'll find this booklet by apologist John Ankerberg and John Weldon a ready reference guide, answering many questions such as how did Islam begin? Who was Muhammad? What does jihad signify? Is Allah like the God of the Bible? What does Islam teach about Jesus Christ? Does the Quran deny the Bible? What basic problems does the Quran present to Muslims? And many other questions. The Facts on Islam booklet is available for a donation of $7 by writing VCY America at 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208. Or you may make your donation by phone by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's toll-free, 1-800-729-9829.
listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. And folks, we're going into some uncharted waters here as a nation, as we have witnessed not only what's transpired during the first 4 years, but folks, the battle is only going to intensify as far as the attack upon religious liberty, our freedoms, and also that on our First Amendment, and the matters are involved with it. Matt, tomorrow's Crosstalk we're going to be devoting to remembering Roe. Tomorrow, the 40th anniversary of that infamous Supreme Court decision, but weigh in on this matter as well. I mean, you've talked about our funding this through Obamacare, funding abortions, but I know that this is a matter that not only weighs heavy on our hearts, but on your heart as well.
Yes, 55 million babies, children, have lost their lives since 1973 when Roe versus Wade was handed down 40 years ago tomorrow. That's an enormous amount. I mean, you just think about 55 million. There's about 18 million or so people in the state of Florida. Round it up to, say, 20 million. That's 2.5 times the size of the third largest state in the country. Have lost their lives with this issue of abortion. And in doing so, not only have they lost their lives, but that means tens and tens of millions of mothers have had their lives affected, some of them have had their lives ruined. Some of them have been healed by the power and the grace and forgiveness of Jesus Christ, but many of them haven't. And then not only that, but fathers and grandparents and siblings. I mean, the toll that it has wreaked on America is incalculable. I was in Israel this past year, and I was at the Israeli Supreme Court speaking to one of the justices there. And the justice was talking about the rule of law and how sometimes the Supreme Court there is looked at as sort of a renegade, and it goes against the will of the people. And he says, well, like you do, we look at the penumbras of the law. Well, he's referring to Roe versus Wade, that word penumbra. When they couldn't find a so-called right to abortion in the Constitution, they looked at the glow, which is the penumbra, emanating from the edges of the Constitution. Couldn't figure it out anywhere, so it's the penumbra. So we have affected worldwide the dismantling of the rule of law when we dismantled the rule of law 40 years ago tomorrow. And
hence also the court decision holding up the constitutionality of Obamacare as well. Yeah,
it's the court decision. It's just part of the whole process. When you deconstruct the rule of law, no longer have a rule of law, it just becomes whatever you get 5 justices of the Supreme Court to say it is, you've ultimately undermined the very basic of our republic. When you undermine the rule of law, it's just whoever's in power, whoever has the political might, and that's how this president operates. And so he's going to force people to fund abortion through Obamacare, shove it down your throat, and if you don't like it, he's going to find a way around it. And it doesn't matter what the Constitution says. Are you concerned that that same methodology is going to be on the table here as it relates to the whole case on defining marriage coming up here shortly? That greatly does concern me, yes. That's going to be argued and then decided by the end of June. And it's 2 marriage cases, one out of California with the state Proposition 8 marriage amendment and one out of New York with the Federal Defense of Marriage Act that defines marriage as one man and one woman. And all you need is 5 justices, and then you deconstruct the entire definition and understanding of marriage. And that has cataclysmic consequences. And it has even more freedom consequences for you and I than even abortion does. Obviously, that has a direct calculation on freedom for those that are the target of abortion, the unborn. But this will have a direct target against religious freedom, anyone who objects to same-sex marriage, religious organizations. This will have a cataclysmic confrontation between freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the homosexual agenda if this decision goes the wrong way. One more question here before we go to the phone lines, which are absolutely packed. Matt, is this a time, you know the Lord is your Savior, is this a time to lose hope? Is this a time for Christians to despair? It's not a time for Christians to despair. We read the Declaration of Independence, and it speaks about this country being unique, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And there's a time in history where people have to stand up for those rights and stand up for those liberties, and when government ultimately evinces a pattern, then it's our duty to be able to be involved and to make sure that government operates correctly. And so we need to never give up hope, because God does not get discouraged. He's not confused or surprised. He always says, and I was just listening to it in Mark chapter 11 this morning on my iPod when I was on my elliptical, that when Jesus says, if you believe in God and have faith in Him and not doubt, God will ultimately intervene. And so we need to have faith in God. He can make mountains move, and He can change the hearts of kings and certainly of presidents.
Let's go to the phone lines. Mike is calling in from Brookfield. You're on the air, Mike.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. As always, thank you for your godly work, both Matt, for sure, and you, Jim, and the beacon of light you've been. When you asked the question before where the second term is going with this president, the one word comes to me as judgment, and I believe firmly there's going to be more severe judgments. People in our country, with what's been going on, as an example, the weather lately in the last few years, with the drought that we've had in this country for months and even a couple years now, and people are thinking global warming. But again, I'm thinking there's more severe judgment coming. This is part of it, natural and man-made judgments, and I think the bigger question beyond there, a problem is that the church has been compromised. And what I'd like to see in the church is that godly pastors and men that lead our churches, and I've been in a couple different churches, different denominations, I won't go into that, but I haven't heard the word abortion out of the pulpit. I have not heard the word of anything with homosexual marriage. I know what I hear behind the scenes. Well, our tax situation is going to be compromised. The church needs to really be standing out as a body, but our leaders in the church too. And I just wanted to get some feedback from that.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, I agree 100%. I couldn't have said it better. I think the church, just like in Nazi Germany, it was compromised. And now we look back and you say, how could the church have done that? How could the pastors have done that? Why would they be silent in the face of Nazism? Well, we have pastors and churches today and people. It's not just the pastors and churches. It's God's people. God's people have been compromised, and they have been lulled to sleep. And I think God's people need to be raised up, whether you're the pastor or church leader or whether you're the one that's in the pew, the one that's teaching Sunday school, or the mom at home, wherever you are. God's people need to rise up. And this is a moment not to shrink, not to get terrified, but to rise up and press forward.
Let's go to Rick in West Dallas. You're on the air, Rick.
Hi. I actually agree with everything that your guest is saying, but I'm a bit discouraged, but I'm kind of angry. It's like, why not go after Obama in a way that would render everything null and void, and that's his past. And I'm going, what's wrong with these people? You can discuss like abortion and homosexuality and all the rights being trashed and appointees. Go after his past. And I'm going, why don't people actually do that? If you render him eligible, it renders everything else null and void. I play chess like really, really well. And why would someone or this country or our leaders want to pass up one move
okay, tell you what, we'll get your point here, Rick. I'm going to have Matt comment on that.
Because I think I know what you're talking. What you're talking about with whether he's eligible to be president because of his birth certificate and his place of origin of birth. There is a case that I don't know if the Supreme Court's going to take it, but in the next week or so they'll decide whether to take it, and it's regarding the birth certificate. My suspicion is that they won't take it. The problem with these cases is not that there's a legitimate issue there. The problem is that the courts have not allowed people to bring the case because they say that you don't have standing, so to speak, a private individual doesn't have standing to bring the case. You may need somebody in the legislative branch or maybe the House of Representatives to take a look at that issue. But it certainly is a very puzzling issue and one that needs to be addressed, and certainly if it were addressed and the information were that he wasn't a citizen, then obviously that would have significant political consequences. And I think that's what the caller was getting at.
Thank you, Rick. To Cora in Muskegon, Michigan, you're on the air.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. But what I wanted to say was, there's so many Christians in churches today. They say they love the Lord, they come, but yet that they vote for Obama. I just don't understand why Christians don't stand up. I mean, not just for a minute, but for everybody. Get a hold of churches and we all stand together instead of, well, you go your way and I'll go mine, and everybody goes wherever they want. And I just don't understand why people just don't see the degradation that we have in this country and all the wickedness that's going on. And I know God listens and I know people are praying, but you got to stand. And I miss people standing up for the Lord.
Matt, we've gotten away from thus saith the Lord, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. I was been going through the book of Jeremiah recently as well, and that's what Jeremiah says. He even confronted other prophets who were saying, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay," contradicting Jeremiah, and thus lulling the people into sleep, telling them what they wanted to hear. People did not want to hear what Jeremiah had to say because it wasn't pleasant. But had they listened, their lives and the nation would have turned out differently. But they didn't want to repent. They didn't want to listen to Jeremiah. They wanted to listen to those people who were either silent or who were giving them pleasing things to hear. Mm-hmm. And so we have that happening today. I mean, we have people who just simply don't want to get involved. We have pastors who are not speaking the truth. They're just trying to be pleasers to everyone in their congregation instead of saying, like you're saying, thus saith the Lord. This is the word of God.
Yeah, and certainly Paul warned about that too, that people would heap to themselves teachers having itching ears.
That's right, yeah.
Let's go to Ty. Hi, go ahead, Ty, you're on the air.
Hi, yes. Boy, there's so much here. I hope I can say what I want to say. But Brandon House, he has a worldviewradio.com. He had a guest on today who was from Germany. His grandfather went through Hitler's regime and all that. I think people need to hear that because I concur with the first caller who says that, it's the church. We've got the problem is within the church, and people need to wake up. We've got too many false churches and diversions from the gospel. I think our problems, yes, we need to. Our first thing we need to do is get the gospel out there. It's a spiritual problem, and then secondarily address these other problems as Christians. But I think the first problem is caused by the lack of the gospel, the true gospel being preached. And therefore, we have a nation that's turned against God, and they have put power and immorality and greed on the altar, instead of God.
Ty,
it's a God.
Thank you so much, Ty. I guess I was reminded, Matt, as Ty was speaking here, even of Abraham Lincoln talking in one of his well-known speeches, but he says, but we have forgotten God. And that's where we really are as a nation. We have forgotten God.
Yeah, and then to swear on Abraham Lincoln's Bible during the inaugural address is just really blasphemy to do that. Lincoln stood for principles completely different than this president stood for. And Lincoln, in his inaugural address and his other Gettysburg address, he referenced God and he spoke of God. And he did it because he really believed that God was ultimately sovereign and that we needed to devote ourselves to him.
We'll take more calls in our final segment when we come back after the break. We're speaking today with Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Their website is lc.org, and their toll-free number is 800-671-1776. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. Perhaps you, like I, have been mocked for trying to warn your family and friends and church members of some of the information that we deal with here at our ministry. Oftentimes, the words of the watchman are not only ignored, but despised. Sadly, many of those who have or will mock you for trying to warn them of false teaching, false teachers, the religious Trojan horse, and the rise of a global false church will finally see that you spoke truth, but perhaps for some of them it will be too late. However, for many, it will be too late only after they've taken part in the evil deeds as described in 2 John 9 through 11. Don't become weary, my friends, in warning people about what's happening within the church today. We're commanded in Acts 20, Romans 16:17, and in Ephesians 5:11 to guard the church and expose false teaching. Be encouraged, for great is your reward.
Matt Staver is with us from Liberty Counsel, and last Friday on Crosstalk, just shortly before the program, we became made aware of this document surfacing at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy's Combating Terrorism Center, linking opposition to abortion and other fundamental positions to terrorism. Pro-life leaders say it's just a way to paint them in a negative way. Matt Staver, I know you're going through this document right now. Were you alarmed when you saw this thing?
I was alarmed, but if you think back in 2010, I believe it was, when Janet Napolitano released the DHS, Department of Homeland Security report, in a footnote, it did the same thing. Mm-hmm. It referred to people who believe in the Second Amendment, veterans, and pro-lifers as being that they would be likely terrorists, domestic terrorists. Now it resurfaces again. Interestingly, right on the eve of the inauguration. You wonder whether they're going to really now start to implement this as part of their policy, and I would have no doubt that they will.
Let's go to Navarre, Florida, and Rick, you're on the air.
Yes, one of the things that hasn't been discussed about the Obama administration is that it's following basically the same pattern that the Clinton administration followed, in that when they first came into office, they were basically scofflaws. And catch me if you can was Clinton's attitude, and it was also Obama's attitude. The difference between Clinton and Obama is that when the Republicans took control of the House back in '94, also as a reaction to the Clinton excesses, the very first thing the Republicans did was initiate a whole bunch of investigations as precursors to impeachment proceedings. And what this did was it not only fired a legal shot across Clinton's bow, but it also gave dozens of committees subpoena powers and ended up perp-walking hundreds of Clintonistas into jail. This really slowed down the Clinton administration in their usurpation of the Constitution, and the same thing should be done with Obama. And it doesn't make any difference that the Senate acquitted Clinton or didn't convict him in a phony trial, I might add. The same thing would happen this time. Right. But the point is, you get the subpoena power, you do the investigations, you put people in jail, you clog up the works, slow them down.
Thank you, Rick. We'll have Matt comment on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then there's so much to do that with regards to Obama. I mean, there's a lot of things
Fast and
that we
Furious.
still don't know regarding Benghazi.
Yeah, Benghazi. Mm-hmm.
And on and on and on. Fast and Furious. We still don't know a lot of things about that. I think what we need is John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, to be very strong, and I think we need to hold his feet to the fire to do exactly some of these kinds of things that are aggressive and that stop this Obama machine.
And yet we find that the House is planning to vote to lift the debt ceiling this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's and then Obama today, what does he say? Entitlements are off the table. Mm-hmm. He in his inaugural speech, he talks about he's not going to address the issue of entitlements and other kinds of spending type cuts that need to be addressed. So, raising the debt ceiling, even for a temporary period of time, is not going to bring Obama to the table. You're going to have to do something else to do that.
Matt, CNSNews.com pointed out today that during his first term, food stamp participants increased by 11,133 persons per day.
It's staggering to think about that.
Yeah, and now entitlements are off the table?
Yeah, and entitlements are now off the table. That's what he mentioned in his inauguration address. He mentioned that he doesn't want to deal with those. So, and he mentioned specifically Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and I'm sure he's referring to other entitlements as well. This is the president that wants to put as many people on the government welfare system as possible. And once you're tipping 50%, I mean, this was part of Romney's message when he talked about 47%. What he's talking about is 47% of the people are receiving some kind of government check. Once you're over 50%, it's hard to return. What we're going to have is a situation like Greece, where everybody gets some kind of government benefit, and then when you have a catastrophe and everyone's about ready to go over the cliff, nobody wants to cut back. And then you have riots in the street. We're going to be in a situation just like that.
Hillsboro, Wisconsin. Bill, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my call. the founders gave us in the Constitution a means of dealing with people like Barack Obama. It's called impeachment.
Yeah.
And we need to get on to our legislators and tell them in no uncertain terms, if they want to go back to Washington, they better get busy and get rid of this man. He has been incalculated with hate America from the day he was born.
I appreciate that. Let's quickly talk about impeachment. We're down to just a short time. Matt, the House has to develop the articles. Some congressmen have said that if the president does thus and so, we will initiate that.
Yeah. You know, I think I would not be surprised if shortly after this second term comes that you'll have some impeachment proceedings in the House. He's just going to push, and he's going to push people over the edge. And I think the House will respond, and if not, we need to make sure that they do respond. That was what the previous caller was getting at, where they initiated these impeachment proceedings during the Clinton administration and stopped him from doing a lot of the things he otherwise wanted to do in his term of office. Obama is different than Clinton in many respects because he is more ideologically driven than Clinton. He is more radical than Clinton. You almost, you know, it's amazing when you almost think it would be nice to have Clinton back, and because he's radical, but he's not as radical. Obama is the most radical, ideologically driven president in history. He will do anything to reach his ideological agenda. He's not a politician, and he doesn't want to compromise, doesn't want to reach out. He'll push his agenda. I think we're going to have some very strong pushback. Impeachment, I think, is one of those areas.
We are down to just about 30 seconds here. I apologize to others on hold right now. We're not going to be able to get to more calls, but Matt, I want to give you that final 30 seconds just to kind of just sum up your thoughts here regarding the beginning of this new term.
Well, you know, it's been a very difficult conversation over this last hour, and, you know, you can't sugarcoat it. We're in a very difficult situation. But what we do need to do is we must not give up. We've got to maintain our focus. We've got to maintain our calling. We've got to maintain our mission. We also have to understand that we serve a God who knows no impossibilities.
Amen.
And so stay involved, stay in tune, stay plugged into Him, and move forward. And, of course, people can contact us at Liberty Counsel at lc.org for more information.
Matt, thanks for being with us today. And if you wouldn't mind just staying on the line here for a moment.
Thank you.
Folks, again, our guest today, Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. He's the founder and president there. You can check him out, lc.org, and get more information. They've got a lot of helpful information there. A new term has begun today. Folks, we need to be praying for this president, be praying for those who govern this nation. We need to turn back to God. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the Internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.